The muzzle of a suppressed rifle glints through the damp leaves of the Idowu forest, but Ngozi does not flinch. At her feet lies a man who shouldn't exist in this part of the world, Choi Suk-jin, a Korean billionaire and titan of the criminal underworld, his silk suit shredded and soaked in blood. As the shadows of professional hitmen close in, Ngozi tightens her grip on the rusted steel of her machete, her pulse steady against the frantic beating of a dying man's heart. She is a princess of a forgotten land, he is a king of a digital empire. If you aren't prepared for a story where loyalty is paid for in blood and billions, you should click away now, because what happens next will redefine everything you thought you knew about power. The rain begins to lash down, blurring the line between the jungle and the predator. Ngozi looks down at the man kneeling in the dirt, a man whose single phone call could collapse markets, now reduced to a wounded animal. She knows the signs of organized violence, these aren't local bandits, and this isn't a random robbery. By standing her ground, she isn't just saving a stranger, she is inviting a global war into the heart of Idowu village. She makes a choice that cannot be undone, she signals him to remain silent and prepares to lead the hunters into the mouth of a nightmare. The dead is forged in the mud of the village floor, and the price of his life is about to be billed to her entire community. Stick around, because you won't believe the scale of the transformation he brings back to these gates, if they both survive the night. Choi Suk-jin's breath comes in ragged, wet rattles as he tries to push himself away from the woman standing over him. His fingers, adorned with a ring worth more than the entire village's annual harvest, claw at the red earth. Leave, he rasps, the command cracking under the weight of his agony. If they find you with me, they won't just kill you. They will erase everything you have ever loved. He knows the men trailing him, men he once employed, men who specialize in the surgical removal of entire lineages. To him, Ngozi is a tactical liability, a ghost in the making. He sees her traditional attire and the machete in her hand and assumes she is a victim of a geography she doesn't understand. He tries to point toward the dense thicket, a silent order for her to run, but his hand collapses back into the mud. Ngozi does not move. She stands like an ancient monolith, the rain carving paths through the dust on her skin. She doesn't look at the forest where the hunters lurk, she looks directly into the eyes of the billionaire, stripping away his titles and his terror with a single, piercing gaze. In this forest, you are not a king, she says, her voice a low vibration that cuts through the thunder. You are a man bleeding on my land. And on my land, I decide who lives. The power shift is instantaneous. The man who dictated the flow of billions finds himself utterly powerless, his survival suddenly dependent on a woman who views his wealth as nothing more than stained fabric. He tries to protest, to explain that the men in the shadows carry high-caliber rifles and thermal optics, but Ngozi's silence is a wall he cannot climb. She reaches down, her grip firm and unforgiving, and hauls him upward. He cries out, a sound of pure vulnerability that would have horrified his board of directors. By refusing to abandon him, Ngozi has just signed a death warrant for Idowu. Every step she takes toward the village with him in tow is a breadcrumb for a syndicate that does not negotiate. She is a princess, and her first duty is to the safety of her people, yet here she is, shielding a monster. The emotional weight of her betrayal begins to settle, she is choosing the life of a dangerous outsider over the peace of her ancestors. As they disappear into the deepening fog, the first flash of a tactical flashlight cuts through the trees behind them. The hunters have found the blood trail. Ngozi knows that by morning, the soil of Idowu might run red, not from the rain, but from the consequence of her mercy. She has saved a man, but in doing so, she may have doomed her world. Thought. The shadows of Idowu are never truly empty, and as Ngozi hauls the limping stranger into the flickering amber light of the village outskirts, eyes begin to peer from behind woven doormats. The air in the village square is thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, but tonight, it carries the metallic tang of fresh blood. 3 elders, their faces etched with the wisdom of decades, step into the path. Ngozi, the eldest, Omid, whispers, his eyes darting to the man in the ruined suit. What curse have you brought to our threshold? The tension is a physical weight, a sudden fracture in the communal peace that has guarded this land for generations. The villagers don't see a billionaire, they see a harbinger of the violence that usually bypasses their hidden geography. Choi Suk-jin tries to straighten his back, the reflex of a man used to commanding skyscraper boardrooms, but he only succeeds in coughing up a spray of crimson. "I am a researcher," he chokes out, his voice thin and unconvincing. "A surveyor for a telecommunications firm. I got lost. My guards were ambushed by thieves." It is a lie so transparent it feels like an insult. His hands are too soft for a surveyor, his watch, though cracked, costs more than the village's entire livestock. The elders exchange looks of sharp skepticism. They have seen researchers, and they have seen thieves, but they have never seen a man who carries himself like a fallen god while claiming to be a servant. The lie hangs in the humid air, rotting the trust between the princess and her people. Ngozi steps forward, her silhouette eclipsing the wounded man. She doesn't correct him, nor does she validate his story. Instead, she assumes the burden of the deception. "He is my guest," she declares, her voice ringing with a finality that brooked no further inquiry. "His business is with me, and his safety is my honor." In this moment, the power dynamic in Idowu shifts violently. By shielding his true identity, Ngozi is no longer just a protector of her people, she has become the keeper of a secret that could incinerate them all. She has placed herself above the collective law of the village, claiming a prerogative that belongs only to the gods. Choi looks at her, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his features. He is used to buying loyalty with wire transfers, he has no framework for a woman who stakes her soul on a lie for a stranger. But secrets are like parasites, they require a host to survive, and they grow heavier with every passing hour. As Ngozi leads him toward her private quarters, she feels the heat of the elder's stares burning into her back. The unity of Idowu is cracking. Suspicion begins to whisper through the huts, a low hum of anxiety that threatens to turn neighbor against neighbor. If the truth about the Korean kingpin comes out, the village will tear itself apart before the hunters even arrive. As she shuts the heavy timber door, the sound of a distant, high-pitched whistle, unnatural and mechanical, drifts in from the forest. The hunters aren't just following a trail, they are closing the perimeter. Thought. The rain does not wash away the scent of iron, it only spreads it across the village floor. At the western perimeter, where the dense canopy swallows the dirt path, the tree line begins to move. These are not the erratic, heavy footsteps of local bandits or desperate men. These movements are synchronized, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. 3 figures emerge from the deluge, clad in matte black tactical gear that seems to drink the moonlight. They carry suppressed submachine guns with a casual familiarity that signals they are not here to negotiate. They are ghosts of the global underworld, surgically precise and utterly indifferent to the sanctity of the village. The low hum of a drone, barely audible above the rhythmic drumming of the storm, hovers just above the thatched roofs, an eye in the sky that sees through the dark. Inside the small hut, Choi Suk-jin stiffens, his eyes fixated on a small, pulsing red light on the cuff of his shredded suit jacket. It is a subdermal beacon, a microscopic piece of technology he thought had been deactivated during the crash. The color drains from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. "They didn't find me by luck," he whispers, his voice trembling with a realization that strips away his remaining ego. "They've had a lock on my vitals since I hit the ground. They aren't searching for me anymore, Ngozi. They are arriving." The power he thought he could still bargain with, his intellect, his wealth, his status, evaporates. He is no longer a man in hiding, he is a beacon for a massacre. He realizes that every second he spends under this roof is a second closer to the total annihilation of everyone Ngozi has ever known. Ngozi watches the shift in him, the way the billionaire dissolves into a terrified prey animal. She doesn't waste time on fear. She moves to the window, peering through the slats just as a flash of lightning illuminates the perimeter. The men in black have stopped. They aren't attacking yet, they are setting up a perimeter, methodically cutting off every exit from Idowu. They are professionals who treat a village of hundreds as a mere tactical objective to be cleared. The emotional pressure inside the room becomes stifling. Ngozi's loyalty to her traditions and her people is now in direct conflict with the survival of the man she swore to protect. To save the village, she must surrender him. To save him, she must turn her home into a graveyard. Time is no longer a concept, it is a closing fist. The drone descends lower, its infrared lens scanning the walls of the hut, painting the inhabitants in shades of heat and vulnerability. Choi looks at the machete in Ngozi's hand, then at the high-tech death waiting outside. The gap between their worlds has closed, but only to create a trap. One of the men outside raises a hand, signaling a breach. The air is thick with the static of a looming explosion. The door to the hut doesn't creak, it explodes inward under the weight of a tactical boot. Rain sprays into the room, followed by the blinding glare of high-intensity weapon lights. Ngozi stands in the center of the floor, her machete held low, her face a mask of stone. Two men in matte black armor sweep the room with their muzzles, the red laser dots dancing across her chest. Behind them stands a third man, his face uncovered, a cold, porcelain-featured operative who smells of ozone and expensive cigarettes. He looks at Ngozi, not as a woman, but as an obstacle. The asset, he says, his voice a flat, synthesized drone. We followed the signal to this coordinate. Give him up, and this village remains on the map. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and impending death. Choi is hidden beneath the floorboards, inches away from the operative's boots, his breath held until his lungs burn. Ngozi feels a tremor in her soul. She was raised in a culture where a princess's word is the bedrock of the community, to lie is to poison the well of her ancestors. But as she looks into the hollow eyes of the mercenary, she realizes that the truth is a luxury her people can no longer afford. He was here, she says, her voice steady, betraying nothing of the storm inside. He stole a horse and fled toward the northern ridge an hour ago. He was bleeding. He won't make the crossing before the river rises. It is a calculated gamble. The northern ridge is a labyrinth of sinkholes and jagged rock, a death trap for anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. The lead operative tilts his head, his eyes scanning her micro-expressions. For a heartbeat, the world stops. The power in the room shifts, the man with the gun is searching for a crack in the spirit of a woman who has never known how to deceive. Ngozi's morality bends, twisting into a shape that prioritizes a life over a tradition. She realizes that by saving Choi, she has stained her own crown. She is no longer the pure protector of Idowu, she is an accomplice to a ghost. The operative lowers his weapon slightly, tapping his headset. Target moving north. Intercept at the ridge. As the mercenaries retreat into the downpour, the silence that follows is heavier than the gunfire. Ngozi collapses against the doorframe, her hands finally shaking. She has bought them minutes, perhaps an hour, but the cost is astronomical. She hasn't just lied to the killers, she has lied to the spirit of her office. Behind her, the floorboards creak as Choi emerges, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and terror. He sees the toll the deception has taken on her, the way her shoulders sag under the weight of a corrupted conscience. The hunters will soon realize the ridge is empty, and when they return, they won't be looking for an asset. They will be looking for revenge. The adrenaline that sustained Choi Suk-jin through the breach begins to sour into a frantic, jagged desperation. He stumbles toward the door, his hands trembling as he fumbles with the latch. I have to go, he snarls, his voice a mix of CEO arrogance and raw panic. They are professionals. When they find that ridge is empty, they will come back and burn this place to the ground just to find the bloodstain I left on your floor. If I leave now, if I run into the deep brush, maybe they'll follow the scent away from your people. He isn't acting out of heroism, he is a man used to controlling variables, and right now, he is the variable that spells certain death for Idowu. Ngozi moves with a speed that catches him by the throat. She pins him against the mud-plastered wall, her forearm a bar of iron across his chest. You leave when the forest says you can leave, she whispers, her face inches from his. The power shift is absolute. In Seoul, Choi is a shadow king who moves markets with a whisper. Here, he is a wounded trespasser who doesn't know which vines are poisonous or which paths lead to quicksand. You go out there now, and you die in 20 minutes. Then they come back here anyway to kill the witnesses who saw you alive. You are staying. Choi stares at her, his breathing shallow. He has spent his life commanding men who fear his bank account, but he has never been commanded by someone who fears nothing he has to offer. He realizes with a sickening jolt that he is no longer the protagonist of this escape, he is a pawn in her strategy. You don't understand, he wheezes, his eyes flickering toward the window. If I stay, I am drawing a map of blood straight to your doorstep. Leaving is the only way to draw the violence away. Leaving is a suicide note, Ngozi counters, her grip tightening until he is forced to look at her. You think you are being noble. You are being a coward. You are trying to choose an easy death in the dark rather than the hard work of surviving. She releases him, and the billionaire slides down the wall, his expensive suit now indistinguishable from the dirt. For the first time in his adult life, Choi Suk-jin submits. He lowers his head, the kingpin yielding to the princess. He is no longer the employer, he is the ward. The pressure in the room shifts from the threat outside to the tension between them. Ngozi now commands a man who could buy her country, but that command comes with a crushing weight. By forcing him to stay, she has taken full responsibility for the massacre that may follow. As the wind howls through the thatch, a new sound begins, a low, rhythmic drumming from the center of the village. The elders are calling a meeting. The secret is out, and the village is waking up. The fever takes hold as the rain turns into a rhythmic, suffocating hum against the roof. Choi Suk-jin's wound, a jagged tear from a high-velocity round that grazed his side, has turned an angry, necrotic purple. The infection is moving fast, a silent predator stalking his bloodstream. Ngozi kneels beside him with a bowl of crushed medicinal herbs and a blade tempered in fire. She expects the billionaire to scream, to weep, or to beg for the morphine that his world provides. Instead, as she presses the glowing metal against his raw flesh to sear the infection, Choi does not move. His knuckles turn white as he grips the edge of a wooden stool, but not a single sound escapes his throat. His eyes remain fixed on hers, wide, glassy, and terrifyingly lucid. Ngozi pauses, the heat from the blade shimmering between them. She has seen hunters endure the bite of leopards and elders suffer through the deepest illnesses, but this is different. This is a disciplined, practiced silence. It is the endurance of a man who has been broken before and learned how to stitch himself back together in the dark. In this moment, the myth of the soft, pampered billionaire shatters. Ngozi sees the man behind the bank accounts, a soldier of a different kind of war, someone who has survived things far worse than a physical wound. The power shifts as her pity evaporates, replaced by a chilling realization. This man is not just a victim of a coup, he is a predator who has been temporarily declawed. The silence in the hut becomes a bridge. As she cleans the wound, her hands, usually so clinical and detached, begin to tremble. The vulnerability of his stillness is more intimate than any conversation they have shared. He isn't just a client or an asset anymore, he is a human being with a terrifying capacity for suffering. By witnessing his strength, she finds herself drawn into his gravity. The emotional conflict deepens as she realizes that humanizing him makes her task impossible. It is easy to protect a symbol, it is devastatingly hard to protect a man whose pain you can feel in your own marrow. She begins to see him not as a threat to her village, but as a person she might actually care to save. You've done this before, she whispers, her voice barely audible over the storm. Choi finally blinks, a single bead of sweat rolling down his temple. In my world, he rasps, his voice like grinding stones, pain is the only thing that doesn't lie. He reaches out, his hand hovering near hers, a gesture of connection that feels more dangerous than the mercenaries outside. The pressure in the room is no longer just about survival, it is about the blurring lines of her own heart. Just as the tension reaches a breaking point, a heavy thud echoes against the door. It isn't the mercenaries. It's the village elders, and their voices are laced with an anger that suggests they've seen the bloodstains leading to her home. The human man she is starting to understand is about to become the reason she loses her people. The elders' silhouettes pace outside like restless spirits, but inside the hut, the air has turned cold enough to crack bone. Ngozi stands over Choi, the bloody herbs still clutched in her hand. The intimacy of the previous moment has curdled. She sees the way he carries his scars, not as marks of tragedy, but as the price of a throne. The men outside are not looking for a researcher, she says, her voice a low, dangerous blade. They are looking for a war. Tell me who you are before I open that door and let the elders decide your fate. No more lies. No more shadows. Choi Suk-jin leans back against the rough-hewn timber, the firelight dancing in his obsidian eyes. The vulnerability of his feverish state vanishes, replaced by a chilling, regal composure. He looks at his scarred hands, then back at the princess. My name is Choi Suk-jin, he begins, the syllables sounding like a foreign currency. In Seoul, they call me the ghost of the Blue House. I am the chairman of the Suk-jin group by day, but by night, I control the syndicates that dictate the heartbeat of the Pacific. I am a billionaire, Ngozi, but I did not build my towers with glass and steel alone. I built them with the silence of my enemies. The air leaves the room. Ngozi feels a cold dread wash over her, a sensation far sharper than fear. She hasn't just saved a traveler, she has sheltered a titan of organized crime. The awe of his scale, the sheer, staggering reach of his power, collides with the moral horror of his reality. He is the very thing she was raised to despise, a man who harvests the world for his own glory. The power shift is seismic. She no longer feels like the dominant protector, she feels like a child who has picked up a fallen star, only to realize it is burning her palm. You are a monster, she whispers, the word catching in her throat. Choi does not flinch. I am a king, he corrects her, his voice devoid of ego, filled only with a terrifying certainty. And right now, I am a king whose debt belongs to you. That makes you the most powerful person in two hemispheres, or the first person they will execute when the door gives way. The realization settles into her bones like lead. By saving him, she hasn't just endangered her village, she has potentially altered the course of global shadows. She is no longer just a protector of a small African community, she is a player in a game of blood she doesn't know how to win. The pressure reaches a breaking point as the first heavy blow strikes the door. It isn't a request for entry anymore. The elders have brought the village guards, and the demand for the stranger's head is no longer a whisper. She has saved a monster, and now her own people are coming to claim the price of his life. The door to the hut groans under the weight of tradition as the village elders force their way into the cramped space. Omid leads the group, his ceremonial staff striking the floor with a sound like a gavel. Behind him, the village guards stand with spears and rusted rifles, their eyes fixed on the blood-stained foreigner. Ngozi, the wind carries a foul scent, Omid bellows, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fury. Shadows move in our trees that do not belong to this land. You have hidden a serpent in the heart of the garden, and now the garden is being surrounded. Bring him out. We will cast him into the forest and let his own demons claim him before they claim us all. The tension is a physical barrier between the princess and her people. Ngozi steps in front of Choi Suk-jin, her hand resting on the hilt of her machete. He is under the protection of the royal house, she declares, her voice a low, steady chime that rings with the authority of her ancestors. To cast out a guest is to spit on the laws that have kept Idowu standing for 1,000 years. The laws are for men, not monsters, another elder screams, pointing at Choi's cold, unblinking eyes. Look at him. He carries the mark of the world that burns. We are a peaceful people, Ngozi. Do not let your pride become our shroud. The power shift is agonizing. For the first time in her life, Ngozi's status as princess is not a shield but a target. By defying the council, she is effectively stripping herself of her birthright. She is no longer the beloved daughter of the village, she is a rebel, a traitor to the collective safety. She looks at her people, the faces she has sworn to protect, and realizes that leadership is not about being followed, it is about the crushing isolation of making the choice no one else can endure. She is sacrificing her reputation and her peace to save a man who represents the very chaos her village fears. If you take him, Ngozi says, her voice dropping to a whisper that silences the room, you take me. And if you kill him on this soil, you bring the wrath of a god you cannot imagine. I am staying. He is staying. If the shadows come, they will have to go through me first. Omid looks at her, his eyes filling with a profound, grieving disappointment. He lowers his staff. Then you are no longer a princess, he says, the words cutting deeper than any blade. You are just a woman waiting to die. He turns and leads the council out into the rain, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence behind. The village guards retreat, but they do not go far. They take up positions not to protect the hut, but to contain the infection within it. As the door swings shut, Choi speaks for the first time, his voice a haunting rasp. You just lost your crown for a man who doesn't have a soul. Ngozi doesn't look back. She watches the window as the first flare from the forest rises into the sky, a searing red signal that the hunters have lost their patience. The red flare hangs in the sky like a bleeding eye, casting a crimson pall over the thatched roofs of Idowu. Outside, the village has fallen into a terrifying, hollow silence. The elders have withdrawn, and the usual sounds of nocturnal life, the bleating of goats, the laughter of children, have been replaced by the sound of boots splashing through mud. The perimeter is shrinking. Inside the hut, Choi Suk-jin moves with a sudden, predatory focus that defies his injuries. He reaches into the lining of his ruined suit and pulls out a secondary device, a sleek, titanium-cased satellite transmitter no larger than a coin. The first beacon was for them to find me, he whispers, his voice regaining its metallic edge. This one is for the hammer to fall. Ngozi watches him, her heart hammering against her ribs. What have you done? She demands. The reveal is chilling. Choi has not been waiting to be rescued. He has been timing an extraction that involves a level of firepower the continent rarely sees. He has coordinated a private military response that will flatten anything between him and the extraction point. In 10 minutes, Choi says, his eyes locked on the blinking green light, a strike team will clear a path. But they won't care about the village. To them, Idowu is just a coordinate in a kill zone. The power shifts again, but this time it is a terrifying fusion. Choi has the raw force, but he is blind to the terrain, the people, and the secret paths that could prevent a massacre. He looks to Ngozi, the arrogance of the billionaire replaced by a desperate recognition of her tactical necessity. He hands her the device. If you don't lead us out, my men will burn this place to save me. You have to guide the extraction. You have to be the one to tell the hunters where to die so your people don't have to. The kingpin is no longer commanding. He is placing the trigger of his empire in the hands of a village princess. The emotional pressure is suffocating. Ngozi realizes that to save her people from Choi's own saviors, she must leave Idowu forever. She cannot stay and explain the blood, the fire, or the stranger. If she stays, she is a target. If she goes, she is a ghost. She looks at the walls of the only home she has ever known, then at the man who has brought the end of her world. Departure is no longer a choice, it is a sentence. Get up, she commands, her voice hardening into a diamond. We use the river caves. If we are not at the clearing when your machines arrive, there will be nothing left of Idowu but ash. As she kicks open the back door, the first muffled pop of a suppressed rifle echoes from the village square. The hunters have breached the inner circle. The last night in Idowu has ended, and the nightmare of the world beyond has begun. The roar of low-altitude rotors begins as a rhythmic thrum in the earth before it becomes a deafening scream in the sky. In the shadow of the river caves, Ngozi watches the village she once led disappear behind a curtain of tactical fog and high-intensity strobes. The extraction team, shadowy figures rappelling from sleek, black helicopters, moves with a terrifying, insect-like precision. They have secured the clearing, but they are not there for the people of Idowu, they are there for the asset. Choi Suk-jin leans heavily against a jagged rock, his face paper white, his hand clutching the wound that has begun to bleed through the fresh dressings. As the lead operative approaches, weapon raised in a cold salute, Choi doesn't look at his men. He looks at Ngozi. The flight leaves in 3 minutes, Choi rasps, the wind from the rotors whipping his hair across his eyes. He tries to stand unaided, but his knees buckle instantly. The reveal is stark and pathetic. Despite his billions, despite the private army hovering above them, the king of Seoul cannot walk 10 feet without her. His internal injuries are far worse than the fever suggested, his body is failing, and his enemies have spies even within his own ranks. If she leaves him now, he will be a corpse before the plane clears the Atlantic, or worse, a puppet for the very men who tried to execute him. He is a titan on the verge of a collapse that would leave a power vacuum across half the globe. The power shift is a violent, internal wrenching. Ngozi stands at the edge of the river, the water of her childhood rushing over her feet. Behind her lies the familiarity of the forest, the graves of her ancestors, and a community that has already stripped her of her title. Ahead lies a pressurized cabin of steel and a world where princess means nothing and loyalty is a commodity to be traded. She realizes that her duty has evolved from protecting a village to stabilizing a monster. If she stays, she is a disgraced woman in a scorched clearing. If she goes, she becomes the only moral compass for a man who controls the fate of millions. She steps onto the landing skid, her hand gripping the cold metal with a strength that surprises even the mercenaries. Everything familiar, the scent of the earth after rain, the sound of the village drums, the safety of being known, is swallowed by the whine of the engines. As the helicopter lifts, tilting toward the horizon, Ngozi looks down one last time. Idowu is a tiny cluster of sparks in an infinite, dark sea. She is no longer the protector of a land, she is the guardian of a kingpin. The pressure of the unknown world ahead, Korea, the skyscrapers, the ruthless syndicates, presses in on her like the cabin's artificial air. She has left Africa, but she has brought the machete-sharp resolve of a princess into a world of silk and slaughter. The air in Seoul does not breathe, it vibrates with the hum of a billion circuits and the cold scent of ozone. As the private jet's hangar doors hiss open, Ngozi is met not by a welcoming committee, but by a wall of black-suited security details and flashbulbs that feel like incoming fire. The humidity of the rainforest is replaced by a sterile, climate-controlled chill that clings to her skin like a shroud. She stands in her traditional wraps, a vibrant splash of earth-tone defiance against a landscape of glass, steel, and clinical gray. Choi Suk-jin is whisked away into a waiting medical convoy, his presence immediately reclaimed by the machinery of his status. For the first time since the night in the mud, he does not look back. The reveal of his world is a brutal shock to the senses. This is not just wealth, it is a panopticon of power. Within the corridors of the Suk-jin headquarters, Ngozi realizes that the mercy she showed in the jungle has no currency here. She is ushered into a high-security suite that feels more like a gilded cage than a sanctuary. The staff look at her with a mixture of clinical curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. To them, she is a primitive curiosity, a fluke of geography that happened to preserve their investment. Her machete has been confiscated, replaced by a digital keycard she doesn't know how to use. The power shift is absolute and crushing. In Idowu, she was the law, in Korea, she is a ghost in a machine she cannot comprehend. The culture shock quickly curdles into a desperate need for survival. She watches the monitors in her room, seeing news tickers in a language she cannot read, featuring Choi's face and graphs that pulse like a failing heart. She realizes that the men in black from the village weren't just a rogue squad, they were a fraction of a corporate and criminal hydra that permeates every level of this city. Every bowing executive and silent maid is a potential spy for the rival syndicate. The emotional pressure of her isolation becomes a physical weight. She has traded her home for a world that views her as an anomaly to be analyzed or discarded. As night falls over the neon-soaked skyline, the door to her suite chimes. It isn't Choi. It is a woman with eyes like flint and a voice like falling glass, Choi's sister, the acting CEO. She places a tablet on the table, showing a live feed of the village of Idowu, now swarming with development teams that look suspiciously like soldiers. My brother is grateful, the woman says, but gratitude is a liability in our family. You saved a king, but you've created a vacuum that we are currently filling. Ngozi realizes with a jolt of pure terror that her departure didn't save her people, it just gave Choi's empire a bridge to colonize them. The pressure mounts as she realizes she is no longer a guest, but a hostage to the very debt she forged. The serenity of the penthouse garden is shattered not by a sound, but by the sudden, eerie synchronized flickering of the Seoul skyline. The lights of the surrounding skyscrapers wink out, plunged into a calculated blackout that leaves the Sukjin Tower an isolated island of backup generators. In the dim emergency glow, the glass walls of the suite vibrate with the rhythmic thud of a breaching charge somewhere below. The rival syndicate, the Baekho, has moved past corporate espionage. They are launching a full-scale decapitation strike. As the security alarms wail, Choi Suk-jin stumbles into the room, his face taut with a panic that has nothing to do with his own survival. He isn't looking for his guards or his encrypted phone, he is searching for Ngozi. The reveal is a sharp, jagged truth. The Baekho don't want Choi dead, not yet. They want the woman who saved him. To the underworld, Ngozi is the Idowu miracle, a symbol of Choi's renewed strength and the only witness to his moment of total weakness. If they can break her, they can humiliate the kingpin and force his abdication. They're not here for me, Choi rasps, grabbing Ngozi's arm and pulling her toward the reinforced panic room. They've put a bounty on your head that exceeds the value of my board seats. You're the only thing I've ever had that they can't buy, and they want to burn you to spite me. In this moment of chaos, the power dynamic that defined their relationship since the jungle undergoes a radical transformation. Choi's fear is no longer directed inward toward his own pain or his falling stock prices, it is projected outward in a desperate, frantic shield over the woman from the forest. He is no longer the cold billionaire managing an asset, he is a man terrified of losing his soul. Conversely, Ngozi feels the weight of her own vulnerability, she is no longer the protector with the home field advantage of the river caves. She is a stranger in a maze of high-tech death. Yet, as they huddle together against the cold steel of the vault door while gunfire echoes through the corridors, the emotional friction between them ignites into something far more dangerous than loyalty. Under the pressure of imminent death, the lines of culture and status blur. As Choi shields her body with his own, the heat between them is an undeniable, desperate pulse. Love, or something just as fierce, is forging itself in the white-hot fire of a siege. It is a bond that defies logic, a princess and a kingpin bound by a debt that has turned into a mutual need for survival. But as the vault door begins to groan under the thermal drills of the assassins, the pressure reaches a terminal velocity. Choi looks at the security monitor, seeing the Baekho leader's face. He realizes that to save Ngozi, he can no longer be the man who hides. He must become the monster he promised her he had left behind. The secondary vault door shutters under a final, violent impact, and Choi Suk-jin stands before a console that glows with a cold, ghostly blue. With a single command, he can activate the Scorched Earth protocol, a sequence that will detonate the gas lines in the lower levels, incinerating the Baekho hitmen and collapsing the rival syndicate's financial mainframe in a single, bloody stroke. His finger hovers over the glass, his face twisted into the mask of the monster he was born to be. If I don't end them now, they will never stop coming for you, he growls, his voice vibrating with a lethal, ancient rage. I have to burn the world to keep you safe. Ngozi steps into the light of the console, her presence a sudden, grounding force against his frantic violence. She places her hand over his, her touch surprisingly warm against his ice-cold skin. The reveal hits him like a physical blow. She isn't afraid of the men outside, she is afraid of the man he is becoming. Blood only calls for more blood, Suk-jin, she whispers. You told me you were a king, but a king who rules over a graveyard is just a ghost. If you do this, the cycle will reach back to Idowu. It will reach every life you touch until there is nothing left but ash. The power shift is absolute. For the first time in the history of his empire, Choi Suk-jin is not listening to his advisors, his ego, or his instincts for survival. He is listening to the moral weight of a woman who has nothing but her integrity. Ngozi is no longer just his savior, she has become the architect of his legacy. She is forcing him to realize that true power is not the ability to destroy, but the strength to refrain. He looks from the screen to her eyes, seeing a future that doesn't involve a throne built on corpses. Under her influence, he makes a choice that costs him everything. He doesn't trigger the explosion. Instead, he initiates a global data leak, a massive, self-destructing broadcast of his own offshore accounts, his sister's bribes, and the Baekho's darkest secrets. He is stripping himself of his immunity, his wealth, and his shadow thrown to force a stalemate that the law cannot ignore. Redemption isn't free, it is costing him the very empire he spent a lifetime building. The pressure inside the vault becomes an unbearable, silent scream. By choosing peace, he has made them both fugitives of a different kind. The Baekho are retreating as the police sirens finally wail in the streets below, but the safety is an illusion. Choi is no longer a billionaire, he is a target with no shield, and Ngozi is now tied to a man who has traded his crown for a conscience. As the vault door is pried open by the authorities, Choi looks at Ngozi and realizes the collision is no longer avoidable. They are going back to where it all began, but this time, they are bringing the fire of a falling empire with them. The dust of Idowu never settles, it only waits. For months, the village had lived in a hollowed-out silence, the memory of the red flares and the missing princess acting as a scab that refused to heal. Rumors had trickled in from the coast like poison, whispers of a fallen king in the east and a war of shadows that had finally reached its end. But on a Tuesday afternoon, when the air is still and the cicadas are at their loudest, the ground begins to tremble. It isn't the rhythmic thrum of the rain or the familiar vibration of the village drums. It is the heavy, grinding gears of a dozen industrial engines. Omid and the elders gather at the perimeter, their spears trembling in hands that have aged a decade in a year. From the mouth of the northern trail, a massive convoy of white, unmarked SUVs and heavy-duty trucks emerges, their headlights cutting through the afternoon haze like the eyes of ancient beasts. The village braces for the final massacre they have long expected. They assume the hunters have returned to finish what was started in the mud of Ngozi's hut. The power shift is visceral, the elders stand ready to die for a land they already feel is lost, their authority crumbling in the face of such overwhelming, mechanical force. But as the lead vehicle stops, the reveal sends a wave of shock through the assembled crowd. These are not tactical teams in matte black armor. Men and women in engineering vests and medical scrubs step out, followed by containers bearing symbols of global logistics and aid. This isn't a military strike, it is a coordinated invasion of progress. The village's fear doesn't vanish, it mutates into a jagged, sharp-edged confusion. They have spent months preparing for blood, only to be met with the sterile, overwhelming presence of a billionaire's apology. The emotional pressure reaches a breaking point as the final door opens. Ngozi steps out, her traditional attire replaced by a sharp, tailored suit that mimics the silhouette of the world she just escaped, yet her eyes carry the same fierce, grounded authority of the girl with the machete. Beside her stands Choi Suk-jin, pale and leaning on a cane, his billionaire's arrogance stripped away to reveal a man who looks like he has walked through fire. The community does not cheer. They stare in a deafening, accusatory silence. They see the roads being paved and the crates of medicine, but they also see the woman who abandoned them and the man who brought the shadow. The pressure of this return is heavier than the departure. Ngozi looks at Omid, seeing the betrayal etched into his brow. She has brought the world to Idowu, but she cannot tell if she has brought a blessing or a final, sophisticated curse. The village stands on the edge of a transformation they never asked for, and the tension of what Choi will do next hangs over the square like an unexploded bomb. The village square of Idowu is a sea of hardened faces and gripped weapons. The elders sit in a semicircle of judgment, the silence so dense it feels as though the forest itself has stopped breathing. Choi Suk-jin stands at the center of the clearing, a fallen titan in a land that does not recognize his currency. He is no longer the man in the blood-stained suit, but he is also not the ghost king of Seoul. He is a man stripped of his armor, leaning heavily on a cane, facing a jury of people who lost their peace because of his shadow. The tension is a wire pulled to the snapping point, one wrong word and the convoys will be torched, and the blood debt will be settled in the dirt. Choi clears his throat, the sound small against the vastness of the African sky. He doesn't offer a contract or a bribe. He points a trembling hand toward Ngozi. "You see a traitor," he begins, his voice carrying a resonance that commands the space. "You see a daughter who fled. But you must know what she did when the world was watching." The reveal is a tidal wave of truth. He describes the night of the siege, the moment she held the moral compass of a global empire in her hands and forced a monster to become a man. He tells them that the roads, the hospitals, and the schools arriving in crates are not gifts from a billionaire, they are the spoils of a worn Ngozi one without firing a single shot. She didn't just save a man, she saved the conscience of a power that could have crushed them all. The power shift ripples through the crowd like a physical shock. The elders look at Ngozi, and for the first time, they don't see the girl who lied, they see the woman who conquered the world they were too afraid to face. The gratitude of a kingpin has transformed into a total structural revolution of their reality. The fear that had defined Idowu for months begins to dissolve, replaced by a staggering, disorienting awe. They are no longer a forgotten village, they are the center of a new kind of empire, one built on the mercy of a princess. But as the shock settles, a new pressure emerges. Transformation is not painless. The younger men look at the heavy machinery and the wealth with a sudden, dangerous hunger. The elders look at the paved roads and see the death of their old ways. Choi has brought more than medicine, he has brought the complexity of the modern world to a place that survived on simplicity. As Ngozi steps forward to stand beside him, she realizes that by saving the man, she has permanently altered the DNA of her home. The community is no longer unified in fear, they are now divided by a future they are not yet prepared to inhabit. The shock is only the beginning of a much deeper, more volatile collision between tradition and the billions that now flow through their soil. The roar of chainsaws and the rhythmic thud of pile drivers have replaced the morning chorus of the Idowu birds. In a matter of weeks, the dirt track that once swallowed the footprints of ancestors has been buried under miles of gleaming black asphalt. A steel-framed hospital rises where the communal medicinal garden once stood, its glass windows reflecting a sky that no longer feels infinite, but managed. Choi Suk-jin's wealth is a flood that does not recede, it is a meticulous, high-speed rewriting of geography. Fiber-optic cables are threaded through the roots of ancient baobabs, and the village square is now illuminated by solar-powered streetlights that banish the sacred darkness of the night. The reveal is staggering in its totality. This is not aid, it is a reconstruction. Choi has leveraged his remaining influence to turn Idowu into a sovereign economic zone, a fortress of progress protected by international charters and private security. The village is no longer a speck on a map, it is a global headline. But as the physical structures go up, the social fabric of Idowu begins to fray under the strain of sudden, unearned power. The power shift is absolute. The elders, once the undisputed arbiters of truth, find themselves sidelined by young men in hard hats who speak of bandwidth and logistics. The hierarchy of age has been crushed by the hierarchy of the dollar. Ngozi walks through the construction site, the wind whipping the dust of the old world against the glass of the new. She sees the confusion in the eyes of the children who no longer play in the river but watch the drones overhead. The emotional conflict is a jagged blade in her chest. She had hoped to bring security, but she has brought a metamorphosis that is erasing the soul of her home. Power is being used differently now, not through the wisdom of the machete or the decree of the princess, but through the cold, efficient distribution of resources. She sees Choi watching from the balcony of a modular command center, his silhouette a reminder of the debt that started this. He thinks he is honoring her, he doesn't realize he is colonizing her memory. The pressure reaches a fever pitch when the first satellite link goes live, connecting Idowu to the digital world. The village is now visible to everyone, including the remnants of the syndicates that Choi thought he had outrun. By making Idowu a beacon of progress, he has also made it a target that can never again hide in the trees. The collision is no longer about survival in the forest, it is about whether the village can survive being seen. As the first luxury vehicles roll down the new road, Ngozi realizes that the price of their salvation is the end of their innocence. The elders are gathering at the riverbank, their faces set in a grim, silent protest that suggests a rebellion is brewing against the very gifts they are being forced to accept. The asphalt of the new road is still hot under Ngozi's feet as she stands at the intersection of two worlds. Behind her, the elders have gathered at the riverbank, their silence a mourning for the Idowu that was. Ahead, the glass walls of the medical center glow with the clinical light of a future she bought with a lie. The tension in her chest is no longer about the hunters in the rain, it is the realization that she can never go back to being the girl with the machete. The village she saved has become a kingdom she must now rule, or watch it crumble under the weight of its own sudden wealth. Choi Suk-jin stands beside her, no longer a kingpin or a patient, but a partner in a legacy that has outgrown them both. He hands her a document, not a check, but a charter. It is the legal foundation for a foundation that spans continents, placing the management of his remaining global assets under her name. The reveal is a quiet, staggering truth: Ngozi was never meant to remain small. The forest was merely the crucible. Her instinct for protection, her ability to stare down monsters, and her unyielding moral compass were always the traits of a global leader. She didn't just save a billionaire, she became the only person capable of directing his power. The power shift is final and total. Survival has been replaced by legacy. The people of Idowu look to her, not because she is a princess by blood, but because she is the bridge between the earth and the sky. She has moved from defending a perimeter to defining a future. The emotional release hits like a breaking wave. The audience sees that every moment of terror, every drop of blood in the mud, and every lie told in the dark was leading to this. She had to lose her village to save her people. She had to leave Africa to learn how to lead it. As the sun sets over a horizon now punctuated by steel and satellite dishes, Ngozi looks at Choi. They are bound by a history that no one else can understand, a debt paid in full, yet a journey only beginning. The world is watching Idowu now, and for the first time, Idowu is ready to look back. The girl who held a machete against the darkness is now the woman holding the light for an entire nation. This was always the only possible ending, a princess becoming a queen of the modern world. What do you think was the exact moment Choi realized he couldn't live without Ngozi's guidance? Was it the wound, or the lie? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where power and loyalty collide.